Alrighty, so starting first question. I think already so far there's been a lot of conversation related to the question of AI creativity and the human experience embedded in that. So we'll start with this question of if we're considering these AI integrated immersive systems and experiences as both creative and cultural forces, what aspects of the creative processes do you feel or have experienced feel essentially human? Meaning that you don't ever want to think about even automating them through AI processes, and what elements of that process are you willing to let AI reshape or transform for you?
I think this is.
I think it's just not a good idea to ever lay down, blanket statements. So I think everything is up for grabs when you're making art. That's all I want to say about that. I think the idea isn't what you're gonna like cordon off and not automate. The idea is what are we doing? What are we doing? We're still talking to each other. That's what we do when we make art. We talk to each other. And those experiences can be and are, and it's intriguing that they are mediated by technologies of all kinds. But we're still just talking to each other. And so part of that talking to each other is futzing with what we've made, with the technologies we've made, and trying to automate random stuff that is going to be about, like making dumb mistakes and making messes on purpose or accidentally. So I don't know. I feel like everything's up for grabs, because the question isn't what we automate or not automate. The question is, what are you as an artist trying to achieve, and how is what you're doing serving that meaning, purpose?
I mean, I still feel like we're in a realm where like personal intervention, like with the tools, like still should shine through. I agree that everything really is on the table. I'm definitely not like, you should not use this as an artist. In fact, I feel like there couldn't be a more important time for artists to engage than right now, in order to like, like ask harder questions about how it's being used. What are the forms? What are the underlying, technologies that use? And in that sense, it's like a very important time to engage. Personally, like as a creative, it is definitely opened up so many different new crazy pathways, which in some way, I know like hearing from the video teams, like, oh, this actually creates more work sometimes, but it's, you're like, oh, but at the same time, you're creating more work, but it's like, I can also maybe create a complete short film as a single person, which would have, never been possible in the first place. So, there's still a lot of hard work to be done when you're using these tools. But I think the wildest shift for me has been, almost from a creative act, like architecting a system that I think takes a lot of skill to do correctly, that is then sort of allowed to interact with an audience independently. And has like different outcomes every single time. And that is sort of like a strange new space for me to play in or try to like create work in. And maybe if people here who create video games are like, oh, I do that all the time, you know what I mean? But this is like enabling this reactive, interactive, customized experiences based off of an architect, and like a system that's been architected by an artist. And I think that's like a really new, strange new territory that has been enabled by this.
Yeah, I think we all agree on the same thing. I mean, for me, I think machines may be able to make anything now, and they are no longer in need of us in a way. So I think the question is also about what we want to do with our world, our communities, and it's also about responsibility. I think there is a transformation coming, and we have to protect intellectual property, integrity, and respect for copyright. So all of the communities, all of the genders can be also represented in this realm. I think with Villa Albertine, with all of our artists in residency, they explore all of this question of restoring dignity for communities. And all of their projects remind us that we are not here to compete with the machines, but much more to collaborate with it and yeah, to kind of stay in touch with them.
Yeah, I think about this question quite often. I think because my work is a hybrid of research and of art and presentation. And when I'm photographing the species, it's very, very important to me to do that all optically and to have the most genuine capture of the species as possible. But then how we interpret that, how we bring that into public installation and make art from that can be used. I can use these tools, but being very transparent with my audience of where that process is. And yeah, so it's like, I think it's really important to be just like have the conversation about where you're using the tools and why, and especially when it's like this hybrid of art and research.
But is it really a cat at the end?
It's a great question, and I think about that a lot.
Yeah, I really appreciate with your answers, you're all kind of revealing the transient nature of even just the question, right, of how it really changes, not only as the technology evolves, but also as the relationship between the technology and human agency and the ability to opt in and reflect on how you integrate the technology into your experiences or your pipelines, frameworks, work, and how that continues to evolve and change even as you continue to experience even the same piece of work or the same technology over time. So thanks for that. Next question I have here is, in both of the artistic and aesthetic output that you all have kind of shared here, AI can act as this mirror that reflects back the language, the biases, and the histories that we've all embedded in the data that AI is trained on. But when experienced through immersion, through these immersive experiences, you can literally step inside that mirror. Does that deepen your understanding of our collective humanity, or does it reveal this filtered, uncanny version of reality, altered by the machine's way of seeing your experiences or what you put into it, or something else completely different? Loaded question.
Yeah. It's the biases are everywhere. I mean, I would say for me, the one project that really was a stark encounter was the Golden Key. You know, it's like, oh, I made a myth-making machine. You'd be surprised what comes out if you just create a myth-making machine and you just let ChatGPT do all the work. Especially we were using the ATU index, which is a very academic database, but our history of storytelling is filled with racial stereotypes, with bigotry, with sexism, and it would surface within an automated storytelling machine. And if you look at, you know, also the visualization we used essentially like in public domain, like 19th century sort of illustrators who did a lot of fairy tales. I mean, it was complete. It's a whitewashed medium, and so yeah, a lot of work had to be done in the prompting to try to create something that was almost fit for public. And in the image generation, you know, I mean, it's a little wild. I'm not saying it's the solution, but I'm like, please make sure there is racial diversity, and like, or like racial diversity, even as like a little prompt, like had to be inserted within some of like the Stable Diffusion like creation in order to try to have like a broader reflection of race within the visualization system. It's inherent right now. Is there meta prompting like levels that try to get that out? Yes. Is it the answer? No. Will we have to eventually return to all of the original data in the first place that were used to create these large systems? Probably. But right now they're, you know, it's they're just like, I mean, anything goes right now in terms of like the data that they're taking in, especially for because the hunger for larger amounts of data in like larger systems. So, you know, in short, yes, it is there. And yes, it's something that you have to grapple with and think about as an artist or a creator of any sort. You know, definitely don't have the solution for how to deal with it, but you have to think about it when you're using these tools.
I think there's a deep problematics to the idea of using data, which is historical, it's in the past, to do anything related to the present and the future. Like you're tying yourself to a very heavy rock. So you think about mythology. Maybe we want to reinvent our myths and our folklore, which is something I've thought about in other projects, like not the one I presented here. So there's already like fundamentally at a systems level, a problem with how AI systems kind of like work conceptually. But then, you know, I think it's important to think very carefully about what we're thinking of as the mirror. So if you want to talk about, well, here's an AI-generated image, let's compare it to a photograph that a human would have taken or a drawing that a human would have made. I don't want to go into whatever schizophrenic world the AI is going to generate here. That you can view that as a kind of mirror, but there's a different way of viewing AI systems as mirrors, which is to step all the way back and to say, generative systems do something similar to what we do as creativity. They generate things, right? It's a kind of mirroring of a human behavior. And we've got a lot of different kinds of algorithms that mirror different pieces of what we understand to be sort of human behavior. And so if you step back that way, you can see AI systems or algorithms in general as like sort of performative objects, performative software objects. And those processes are themselves mirrors. So we can look there. We can say, what is this very limited, weird little generative thing that an AI does? And what is this much more robust, creative thing that even like a little tiny child can do? And that is interesting. Where are the failures of the systems as like mirrors of our own behavior? So, and then if you step all the way back and look at behavior as a mirror, then you start talking about, okay, who's deployed these algorithms? What are the systems of power? And how are those systems of power impacting social and political situations? There, I think the mirror becomes really interesting and really worth thinking about. So if I have anything that I would love for you all to like walk away with is the idea that AIs can, all algorithms, not just AI, can show us where powers are, where power is, and where our agency begins and ends. And we ought to be looking a lot at agency. Okay, that's my TED Talk. Thank you. That's literally my TED Talk.
Organizers, do we have time for one more question? I'll ask it anyway. Okay, so kind of the closing question. I think there's been a lot of conversation about, especially when it comes to integrating AI into immersive experience, the audience members now become an active part of that, and what does that look like? So the question is, if we're really thinking, like I mentioned, of these audience members no longer as just spectators of the work, but as active collaborators within these interactive and generative systems, what role do you imagine they play in shaping the future of AI-driven immersive culture? And here's the doozy. What responsibility do we all share in steering what comes next?
Well, this is perhaps the most important question. And yeah, I think we believe that audiences are not passive and they are actually the co-author of meaning. I feel audience as citizens also. So for me, it's a kind of civil act when they are creating. And yeah, we need to bring in this immersive space still a space for inclusion, transparency, and of course, imagination and poetry. So yeah, I think throughout there are a lot to do again with memories and collective awareness.
Nice. Okay. Yeah, I think it's really important to have immersive experiences because from my experience of watching these kind of immersive experiences and having people engage in the work, it builds a sense of community and starts to have conversations that, at least in my personal work, I didn't see around a static image just mounted on a wall in a gallery show. And I still deeply love producing those, and I love still having those shows and going to those shows, but there's something really amazing about people coming and all watching each other interact with immersive experiences and then the conversations that revolve around that. And so that's what's really exciting for me about producing these and building community and then having the community expand and then all the conversations that come out of that. And where our responsibility, it comes back to just full transparency of how things are being made and the process that we're doing and having conversations like this.
I think what you described of your work is super interesting because you're like having to toe this line between fact and fiction, which is super interesting, like having to have real fidelity to the world, but then being like, okay, but I'm also free to invent things if I want, but holding the line there.
I think I've gone off pretty extensively about like how this is the big new affordance of the technology is creating these interactive mechanisms, being able to, engage and fine tune like how you react to individuals with an experience. And I don't know, I feel like this is sort of this brave new world where you're going to see this new territory. We already have video games that are looking more like cinema that's already looking more like video games, younger audiences that want reaction, interactivity, immersion. I spend a lot of time thinking about how I'm no longer young, but also like how are young people who are growing up with iPads in their hands are starting to consume and demand out of media. There's a very big shift going on, and in that sense, there is a lot of room for creativity, for exploring new formats, for really pushing into new territory that are beyond what we would consider our like siloed media creation environments. And once again, it's like emphasize like this is a time to experiment. This is a time for artists to be involved, not only just to blindly use the tools, but also to question, where they came from, and maybe within those like works, like expose what the significant change that's occurring around us is happening. So I think that there's there's a lot has happened in the past few years. I feel that there's going to be a lot more shift occurring, in the decades to come, in terms of this being I feel like we're like in like the iPhone 3 moment of AI. It's like there's a lot of iteration to come. There's a lot of different ways I feel that this technology is going to start being used, and hopefully it's not a massive bubble that crashes our entire global economy, maybe. But yeah, feeling great.
I actually don't often feel great. I have a tendency to catastrophize, but I do find that the most exciting artists to me who are using these technologies are the ones who are taking the technologies and using technology to critique technology, which I think is it's what we artists can do, should be constantly pushing at that question.
Wonderful. Thanks so much for panelists for answering the question and your time and attention. And I think we're going to break for lunch now. Oh yeah, food.
Thank you.
Thanks everyone.